So let's talk to a dairy farmer who's worried about the end of supply management. Ghislaine Truer owns Creekside Dairy at Agassiz, BC. She isn't at today's meeting in Ottawa, but she sure is watching what's happening there quite closely. Ghislaine, nice to see you. Thanks for coming on the show. How concerned are you about supply management, that it may be traded away amid this dispute with the United States?
I think as an industry and as a farmer myself, we're very concerned. Supply management guarantees stability for our farms. And with that gone, I don't know what the future would look like.
You recently, as I understand it, you recently bought your farm. So it's not like this is a legacy operation that's been going on for a long time. How prominently did the system of supply management and the protections that it offers to farmers like yourself factor into how much you could afford, how much you could put down, and how worth it was for you to buy this farm?
We bought our farm about 7 years ago, and when you go to the bank to ask for a loan, they look at our system as a guarantee of stability. So they know that as long as we're producing milk, we're going to get a guaranteed income and we're going to be able to make our bank payments. So that is a huge factor in borrowing the amounts of money we needed to start up our dairy farm here.
And yet, I mean, the pushback on this is there's a report out of the University of Manitoba a little while ago that said the supply management system costs the average household in Canada an extra $450 a year in milk. The average household with children, that jumps up to $600. Why is it worth it for those of us that need to buy your milk? Why is it worth it for us to have this system that's essentially a tax on consumers?
I'd actually beg to differ on those numbers. Nielsen did a study on that, I think it was in 2016, and it shows actually that if you compare apples to apples, so if you compare our dairy prices to the American hormone-free dairy prices, because all milk in Canada is artificial growth hormone free, you'll see that our milk is actually slightly cheaper than the American dairy price. So I think any way you look at it, consumers are getting a good price, and they're not being asked to also fork out taxes for subsidies like they have to do in the States to bolster the dairy prices there.
I mean, that notion that we're protecting consumers from milk that may or may not be hormone-free, would you be okay with allowing more American milk into Canada so long as it met certain safety and health standard requirements?
We already allow a lot of imports. We allow 10% compared to the US 3%. If it's hormone-free or not, they still have the economies of scale down there. Our average farm size here is 85 cows. They've got dairies down there with tens of thousands of cows. They can produce milk a lot cheaper than we can, and the amount that they produce would totally flood our market. It would literally drive our dairy farms out of business.
So, I mean, you're not in this meeting with the Prime Minister, but your colleagues are. What do you hope the Prime Minister is being told right now? Because there's no question this has become a very live issue.
I know that my colleagues and our boards are encouraging the Prime Minister to stand firm, to not give in to Trump's demands. And I'm confident that our Prime Minister is going to stand behind us on this.
All right, Ghislaine, we're going to leave it there, but I really do appreciate you coming on. It's great to get your perspective. Ghislaine Truer owns Creekside Dairy in Agassiz, BC. Now, for a slightly different perspective on supply management and why it may be time for it to end, we have Sylvain Charlebois, Dean of the Faculty of Management at Dalhousie University. He joins us from Bournemouth, England. Sylvain, nice to see you. You wrote a piece earlier this week saying essentially that supply management was already maybe not doomed, but in trouble heading into the situation we saw on this weekend. Was it already sort of facing extinction?
I think so. I mean, the fundamental principle of supply management is to produce what we need. I mean, it was set up almost 50 years ago to support a food sovereignty agenda. What's awkward is that we operate an open economy. Canada is a very open economy. We trade with other nations, and that's why when NAFTA was signed back in 1990, I believe, or 25 years ago, there were a few nations with a supply management regime. We're the only one left now. Europe, where I am now, used to have a supply management scheme, but it got rid of it back in 2015. Korea, England, New Zealand, Australia, they have all decided to move on, and Canada's the only one left, and that's why a lot of people are pointing fingers at us. And since then, we are seeing dairy farmers across the country realizing that the writing is on the wall. We're seeing some positive changes all the way through, particularly in Ontario and BC.
I think a lot of people would agree that the supply management was definitely one of the bargaining chips that we took into the early days of the NAFTA negotiations. Given the events of the weekend and the very strong stance that Trump and the U.S. administration have taken about dairy, there are a lot of people saying it's off the table now, that it's immovable, and that it would look like we've just completely capitulated to a bully. Do you think in a weird way supply management has been given a lifeline as a result of the events of the weekend?
I'm not convinced. I think that the Trump administration has mastered the ability to intertwine supply management with other sectors that means more to us, like the automotive sector, for example. It has realized, probably for the first time openly, that supply management is a sacred cow to us. No pun, but it used to be an untouchable. But I suspect that supply management may be on the table. Politicians won't touch it because politically it is suicidal. We saw what happened with the only politician who decided to make this an issue. That was Maxime Bernier. And he lost the leadership race for the PC party. And so it is untouchable politically, but economically, stakes are very high.
But if we are to move away from it, we just heard from Ghislaine Truer, who talks about her farm would be in real trouble, her mortgage payments would be in real trouble, there would be farms across the country that would go out of business. What do we need to do to make sure they're on board and make sure they're okay and healthy? We don't want to see them go out of business. What does the government need to do for them?
Well, because of the political hypocrisy that we've seen in Canada, dairy farmers have every right to be very nervous. We're not providing them with a vision or a strategy at all for the next 15 to 20 years. Here in Europe, they took 13 years to get rid of their system. Out in Australia and New Zealand, they took 18 years to get rid of their system. So it takes time to move forward on a reform. We have a very polarized debate on supply management. You're either for or against it. Nobody's in the middle trying to find out what supply management 2.0 should look like. And that's what dairy farmers are looking for right now. They don't have any answers.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Sylvain, thanks for making the time. Sylvain Charlebois, Dean of the Faculty of Management at Dalhousie University.